Okay, we're live. Hello and welcome to the House and Senate Progressive Caucus. It's Tuesday, February 11th, and today's a special day where we have visitors from all around the state who are members of the Progressive Party. So we're going to be mostly focused on our members today. We're going to start off just quick round of introductions. If everybody could say your name and the town that you're from. Then we're going to give a quick update on us, what committee or committees we're on, what we're working on. And then Representative Chena, the assistant leader of the House Progressive Caucus, is going to lead us in a listening session because we really like to hear what's on your minds and what you'd like us to be working on. So I'll start. I'm Representative Kate Logan. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm from Burlington.
Senator Tanya Vyhovsky. I also use she or they pronouns, and I live in Essex, but I represent Burlington, Winooski, Essex, and a sliver of Colchester, most of Burlington.
I'm Representative Chloe Tomlinson, use she, her pronouns, and I live in and represent Winooski.
Jackie Stanton, she, her, Johnson.
Bruce Legal and Belvedere.
Merrick Broderick, he, him pronouns. I live in Burlington. I represent Ward 8 on the City Council in Burlington.
Josh Ronsky, Executive Director of the party, and I go by he, him. Also live in Burlington.
Lisa Gerlach, she, her in South Burlington.
Tony Masuga, you see him, and I'm in South Burlington.
Tucker Harwood, I use he, him, and I live in South Burlington.
Jesse Warren, he, him, and you're from Burlington.
Cadence Case, she, her, Burlington. Karen Butt, she, her, Burlington.
Eli Carini, he, him, Heartland.
Katie Miller, she, her, Heartland. Kathy, South Burlington, she, her. Sharon Darrow, I'm she, her, in Sutton. Joe Knowles, she, her, Heartland.
Peter Carini, he, him, Heartland.
Hunter Lee. Hunter.
Lynn Barnes, Wakefield, she, her.
Doug Barnes, Wakefield, EM.
Courtney Becker, Williamstown, she, her.
Jasmine Murid, Johnson, Vermont, she, her.
So Morris, Marshfield, Vermont.
Brian Sheena, Burlington, they, he, she.
Thanks so much for joining us from all over the place. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time, each of us, telling you about some of the work that we're doing. And we'll go ahead and start with Rep. Tomlinson.
This is my first term in legislature, and I'm working on the House Transportation Committee, which is really exciting for me because there's some really important work to be done in this committee, particularly around public transit and identifying more sustainable funding sources for our public transit system. We're facing a cliff in federal funding and also seeing overall transportation fund revenues decline. So we need to find a way to make sure that this really important service for Vermonters is continued and has a sustainable revenue source moving forward. Additionally, we have a few, I'm expecting we're going to have some really critical climate policy in our committee. The transportation sector is our source of our largest percentage of our greenhouse gas emissions. And there's important work that's been done already in terms of climate in the transportation sector that have concerns is at risk of taking a step backwards at this point, given some of the changes in composition in the legislature. There is also some room for potential progress forward. We've done some, there's been a study on a possible tap and invest program for our transportation system that we're expecting a report release on February 15th about. So that's an opportunity to move forward, I would love to keep pushing us forward in terms of reducing our climate working towards our climate goals in the transportation sector. But I think we're going to be doing a lot of defending our ground and the progress that we've made so far. So that's my work in my committee. In addition to my committee work, been working on supporting legislation that Senator Vyhovsky is putting forward on tenant rights, and we'll be sponsoring a bill on the House side around tenant protections. So I'll maybe hand it over to you from there.
Yeah, sure thing. So Senator Tanya Vyhovsky, I think most of you were there a little while ago. I'm on the Judiciary Committee and the Government Operations Committee. And in the Judiciary Committee, we deal with sort of everything involving crimes and prisons and the judiciary. And so, sitting in that committee as a social worker and not a police officer and not an attorney, I really working to make sure we're bringing the human aspect to those systems and really looking at investing in prevention and investing in our citizenry in a way that actually creates public safety and doesn't just create punishment. And then in government operations, we touch everything from municipal charters to elections to anything state government touches. So it's a pretty broad committee. I'm still sort of navigating. That committee has been handed over to a Republican chair, so I'm sort of navigating what that looks like and what may be possible as vice chair of that committee to a Republican chair. But some of the things we almost passed last year, but I reintroduced today around privatizing state contracts and putting limitations and guardrails around that was just reintroduced today, and that'll come to that committee. And then in Judiciary today, we were talking about what mechanisms the state has to protect migrant workers and immigrants in Vermont from the federal government. And the mechanism we are looking at right now is whether or not we can put checks and balances in place so right now, the way the law reads is the governor can choose to enter into ICE contract with no check and balance. And we are exploring whether or not we can set the General Assembly as a check and balance for that. We're not entirely sure that we can, but we're going to try. The other thing I will be doing to protect our migrants and immigrant workers in Vermont is actually expanding our Good Samaritan law. So we have a Good Samaritan law that says if you call for help or you report an overdose or you go get drugs checked to make sure they're not contaminated, you can't be arrested. And we're going to actually expand, I'm going to put forward a bill that will expand that Good Samaritan law to say you can be arrested or reported to ICE if you ask for help. And so that will be another space. We're really kind of exploring what we can do, and what we've heard both in government operations from the National Guard and from our legislative council is there's actually not a lot, but we're going to do everything we can. I'm also, as I said earlier, doing a lot of work on education, sustainable funding for that, moving away from a property tax, which is regressive. It puts an unfair burden on middle and low income Vermonters, while the wealthiest Vermonters pay a fraction of a percentage. So moving off that primary homestead tax. Which doesn't mean vacant second homes couldn't still be taxed, but the primary residence would actually move from a property tax to an income-based tax. I've got some draft language in hand that hopefully I'll be introducing publicly shortly. Which is kind of going through to make sure it actually does what I want it to do. The other area that I'm doing a lot of work is in housing, as Representative Tomlinson said she'll be putting forward a companion bill to that. I served on the Landlord Tenant Law Commission over the summer and fall. Really looking at how we protect our tenants. We've seen as I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone in this room that the housing situation in Vermont has gone to absolute crisis levels over the last 5 or 6 years. We were not in a good place for probably at least a decade, but in the last few years since COVID, it has really become untenable. As I believe the only renter in the Senate, I have been a pretty loud voice for protecting our tenants. And with the explosion of unsheltered homelessness, it's even more critical that we keep people housed. So I am putting forward an omnibus tenant protection bill that looks at things like just cause eviction, rent stabilization, mandatory legal representation in evictions cases, the tenant and community first right to purchase a building that's being sold, as well as establishing a revolving loan fund so people actually have the capital to invest in purchasing the building they live in. There's some other eviction expungements. So evictions would actually be removed from someone's record after a period of time. In the current market, if someone is evicted and they can be evicted for no reason, and there's nothing you can do to prevent that, really. I mean, you can go to court, but it's really just about how long until you get evicted. Once you have an eviction on your record, it's almost impossible in the current market to find an additional rental. So this would establish that after a certain period of time, those would be removed from your record. So there's a bunch of stuff in that bill. There's a rental registry, which we've been talking about for a really long time. And one of the things that came up in the Landlord Tenant Commission a lot was like, we just don't have the data because we don't have a rental registry. And then I'm just looking for all kinds of places where we can protect the people in Vermont who have least access to power, but are being harmed the most by regressive policy. And that is going to probably touch a bunch of different committees. Some of the healthcare bills I put forward are about that. But I'm a social worker when I'm not in the state house, so I'm really bringing that lens into everything I do. I feel like I talked a lot, so I'm gonna turn it over to someone else.
I'm on the House Committee on Environment. This is my second session. Last session, I was on House Committee on Environment and Energy. This year, that committee is split into two. So our jurisdiction in environment is anything related to land conservation and development. So all the Act 250 reform that's been going on, that was in my committee last session. We'll be doing some more stuff related to land use. I think we're gonna have to in order to field the housing policies that are coming from the governor that he's trying to promote this year. I will be blocking most of that, I believe, in my committee. Happy to talk about that with anyone. I know there are a lot of folks within our membership who have a lot of interest in Act 250. We also, do all the legislation related to air, water, fish, and wildlife. So PFAS is in our committee, for example. We've been learning a lot about PFAS so far this year already. We'll be doing some work on water quality related to the TMDL on phosphate because we're falling behind. We've got 10 years to meet some goals on phosphate reduction so that we can, get rid of blue-green algae in Lake Champlain and things like that and be more resilient for climate change. So we'll be working on TMDL stuff, primarily focusing on agriculture. That's where the majority of phosphate runoff is coming from. We also do solid waste management. So we'll be talking about the fact that the Coventry landfill is getting full and what we're going to do about that. So those are the kinds of things we're working on in committee. Happy to talk with you all about that kind of environmental policy anytime. Just reach out to me. And then separately, I'm continuing on work from the Energy Committee last time, sponsoring a few bills, one on establishing a community solar program because the utilities had their heart set on eliminating the virtual net metering program, which would allow you to get net metered rates from your utility for a solar installation that was installed not on your property. So net metering is still available for solar installations on your property, but not off-site. This impacts the ability of large affordable housing developments, for example, to utilize off-site net metering. I had a problem with that, especially because we're starting to see more investment in larger solar projects that could potentially benefit affordable housing communities. And you can imagine people who have solar panels right now might not pay an electricity bill for years. And that would be the same for folks in affordable housing who could actually use the discount quite a bit more than the people who are currently getting it, in my opinion. So I'm working on that. And then a number of other things, like, for example, our efficiency utilities, like Efficiency Vermont right now, their performance is judged on, how much less electricity they're able to get Vermonters to use. But we're actually trying to get Vermonters to use more electricity by switching off of fossil fuel heat sources, for example, or starting to use an EV. So that's no longer the best way to judge the efficiency utility's success. So we're going to be trying to include standards around carbon emissions reductions as part of their metrics for success, as well as what percentage, establishing standards on what percentage of their programs need to benefit low and moderate income Vermonters, as well as small businesses and nonprofit businesses. So little nitpicky things, but I feel like that's the kind of legislation we might be able to get passed in this political climate that I think will actually make a big difference. And then I'm, lead sponsor on Just Cause Eviction, or one of the lead sponsors on Just Cause Eviction for the House, doing a bill with Tanya, as a companion bill with Tanya, to establish a funding source for people to repair their homes, so that they can do things like weatherize their homes or get solar panels, because a lot of people, especially low and moderate income households, can't take advantage of those programs because they need their roof repaired or their soffits repaired or something like that, and or foundation work done. And so until they get that work done, they can't take advantage of the low income weatherization program or subsidized solar panels on their homes and things like that. So that's something we're working on. Then it just in response to the Trump administration, as soon as I was able, I put in bill requests for just like a whole raft of workers' rights protections. There are a number of folks throughout the legislature who are working on other areas of rights that we want to establish in the state if we didn't already have something on the books. That we see, you know, LGBTQ protections, taking a look at our fair and impartial policing policy, you know, anything we can do to shore up rights within the state. And workers' rights are one of those. So, you know, collective bargaining, we need to we need to protect collective bargaining. We're in the process of, you know, finishing up a constitutional amendment that would allow voters in Vermont to make sure that that right is in our constitution. So even if that right gets taken away nationally, it'll be a right in Vermont. And then just a bunch of stuff, you know, eliminating the tip minimum wage, getting the agricultural workers a minimum wage, raising the minimum salary for exempt employees so more people can get overtime, trying various strategies for boosting enforcement on workers' rights laws, eliminating things like stay or pay provisions or non-compete agreements, making sure you can only get fired for a good reason, and then giving unemployment insurance benefits to striking workers. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm working on. Not quite sure, aside from the energy bills, which have a really viable path forward this session, but we'll be working on it. It's hard to say. Sometimes things end up having bipartisan appeal that you don't expect. And I'm just getting to know a lot of my new Republican colleagues. Pass it to-
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to model what I want you all to do, which is keep it to a minute. Because otherwise everyone's not gonna have a chance. And the way that I'm gonna moderate it is I'm gonna set a timer, and when it goes off, I'm not gonna stop it till you stop talking. Because I don't wanna be like, you know, cutting you off, so you just have to do it yourself and finish what you're saying while the thing goes doing, doing, doing. So I'm not gonna be able to say much in a minute. It's gonna show you how little time each of you have. I'm gonna hold myself to the same thing that I'm asking of you, so to model it. So I can do this. I'm not gonna be able to tell you everything in a minute, so let me say that much. Okay? So in the healthcare committee, in which I'm on, we're gonna be working on controlling costs, that my hope is taking steps toward increasing access to primary care and taking steps towards universal health care. It's a long road, but I think we can take a few steps towards it this session. Housing is gonna be the area where I wanna see the most. I'm working on a bill that's gonna come out soon that looks at all different creative solutions, like creating tool banks and community-owned tool banks and labor pools and classes so that people could learn how to do it ourselves and have access to the resources to help each other do it ourselves, sort of like barn raising 2025. Think of it that way. As well as the state stepping in and building housing like for 18 to 26-year-olds that all can live in, so that DCF kids have a guaranteed place. And when you live there, your rent, a portion of it goes into account. By the time you turn 26, you have enough perhaps for a down payment on a home or an apartment at the very least. There's programs in Finland that do this. So see how little you can do in a minute. So, all right, there's much more. But what we're gonna do is, we're just gonna go around, you'll get a minute. If you pass, the next person will go. We're just gonna go, boom, 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 so everyone gets a chance. Ready?
And what do you want people to be talking about?
You have a minute to share your concerns. That's all I'm gonna say. Anything you want us to hear in a minute. unless you want more focus, but I don't want to limit people. If you want to be like, I think that predatory tow truck company should be brought down, then you can say that in a minute. If you want to say, I think we should have fusion candidates, or we shouldn't, you could say, I think that we should have only corporate healthcare, raise my taxes, whatever you want to say. So no one ever says that. Right.
Some people do.
Some people do.
I'm curious who, but we'll come back to this. All right. Well, can we start with you? Just say your name again and then,
Shit, all right, okay.
Joe, you're not ready yet? How about we all take a deep breath, ready?
Yeah.
We'll all take a deep breath, just clear your head and be ready. So there's no pressure. If you can say pass, you can say come back to me if you're stressed.
No. Jackie, this might be a little bit off topic and it's kind of random, but I work for a small nonprofit and other small nonprofits have begun to do things like scrub their websites of language that says LGBT, that says blah, 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 blah. It feels to me that that's early rollover and capitulation. What is your opinion about that?
Oh,
Do you have any recommendations?
I direct a nonprofit. I think the way that we're approaching this is if it's gonna get in the way of us receiving federal funding. Maybe we will scrub our website. We haven't done so yet,
Okay.
but we might, and then we'll just do the work.
The state people are doing that right now, where
Yeah,
things are
they are.
going off the websites, but they're still in existence as discussions continue about how to proceed.
Yeah.
Look, we did all that in we have 6 seconds left.
Yeah.
Good job.
But we're still gonna do the work.
Yeah.
And then we have less reporting requirements.
All right, next.
Pass.
Pass.
Are
you gonna say something, Josh?
Sure, I'll say something. So Josh, from Burlington, one issue, I think the just cause eviction piece is huge. I'm in a separate role. I'm serve on the housing board along with Lisa. And we regularly see folks come in and have all sorts of reasons why they are having money taken out or are losing their housing for reasons that are really unjustifiable. So yeah, anything we can do to move that forward is huge.
There was some really powerful testimony around no cause evictions and the exponential increase in those from Sam Abel Palmer in the Judiciary Committee on Friday. That's worth a watch. So all of those committee meetings are available on YouTube, and he talked about the numbers increase and just what they're seeing, and it's pretty alarming.
I can talk.
Have a good time. Ready?
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah,
Go.
Lisa, I worked for David Zuckerman for the past couple of years as the chief of staff, so I'm no longer in the building, so a little bit more disconnected than I was before. And I feel like everything I say will be preaching to the choir, but obviously housing and making sure that permanently affordable, low income housing is available for people is huge, especially since the biggest predictor or the biggest cause of homelessness is a lack of housing, a lack of affordable housing. And I know that's something that probably everybody in here knows, but it's just seeing the way that folks have been pushed out onto the streets and the effect that that's had not only on individuals, which I think is something that should be enough to say we shouldn't put people in these terrible positions because it's bad for the individuals, but also bad for the communities. For, petty theft, it's probably increased when there's more people who are on the streets who don't have a roof over their head, who need more supplies. So there's just so much of it boils down to the need to build affordable housing.
Yes, people building housing. All right.
I'm Tony, and I guess also I would say my biggest concern is housing, and to kind of just expand. I think something that also needs to get done is also considering the harm that worse solutions can do too. Because recently we had, the end of the voucher program, and you have over 1,000 people who are suddenly out on the streets. And then we spent more money to hire last minute out of state contractors to serve, I forget if they got 3 or 2 facilities done
Yeah.
for 17
like a dozen
families.
people.
And spent more than the motel program cost. So there's solutions that are causing more harm that I think that there's just no, since it's an issue that's so, these people are so out of sight, they're so out of mind, the harm that's done to them is also there. And I think that these solutions need to hold their humanity in mind.
We'll be passing a bill on the emergency housing program, and Merrick will be following that. So hopefully you'll get some communication out from us here in the next few weeks about what that policy is gonna look like. Or what we're hoping it's gonna look like.
Okay. Yeah. My name's Tucker. My big issue is increasing revenue by making the wealthy pay more. I think a lot of the programs that are being and ideas that are being discussed here are going to take money, and especially with ed funding being on the chopping block, I think it's like a prescient issue. And I think the idea of an income-based property tax is really exciting. I think it actually is smart in a lot of ways, but one way that it, I think, directly addresses the opposition's argument that these people will leave if you tax them more. So I'd be interested in talking about that more.
I'm going to respond to that in the 10 seconds left and say that the housing bill I'm introducing has a income tax surcharge on the top 1% of a small amount, but it could raise 50 to 100 million a year. And I'm proposing that a quarter of it go into the housing programs that the state makes, a quarter goes into loans for people to buy homes or like to subsidize people buying homes. A quarter goes towards homestead relief and a quarter goes to all property tax relief. So just to give you an example of one way we can recapture it. Right? You ready?
Well, the thing that's coming to my mind, I could echo a lot of the things that have been said in this meeting and the one before. But I think all of you are my friends. I know all of you, and I know other people in the legislature. And what's coming to my mind is it drives me nuts how little you guys are paid. I'm like it just seems like there's no way you or anyone in the legislature could possibly, like, if you're constantly you don't have health, like you guys don't get health insurance, right? Like,
No.
It's crazy.
There's a reason I'm the only renter in the Senate.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, this is definitely preaching to the choir on this one, but I guess I'm just like vocalizing support. And I wish there was some way that, because obviously the legislature can't just politically can't just vote for a raise, like it probably wouldn't be received. Maybe it could, but if there's some way to, I mean, I think all of you have talked about citizens assemblies and to some degree, there's a way to do that where then the public can come in and look at what's going on and say, now we get it. This is ridiculous, and figure out some way to fix it, but yeah.
That's just something.
I've got an idea.
That's Bill Scott's wallet exploding as he gets a 6.4% raise, followed by a 5.5% raise after vetoing our pay raise and recommending 0% for frontline healthcare workers. Next. But Tanya did say talk with her about that. I didn't want to miss
I've got
that.
an idea, because the Senate did vote to raise legislative pay last biennium, and the governor was awful about it and vetoed it.
But then he preached about it all over the state during the campaign, but he accepted his raise. He didn't object to that.
Making him the second highest paid governor in this country.
Well, we have the second highest rate of homelessness. It did drop to fourth because of Hawaii's disasters, but second smallest state, second highest rate of homelessness, second highest paid governor. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Cadence, I want some clarification around the property tax proposals and eviction protections. First, if we move toward a model where primary residences aren't taxed for property, but rather on income, do we anticipate that property taxes will continue to rise on rental properties? And if so, any protections we can put in place for all that being passed on to the renters? Rent control. And second, can you have a no cause eviction on your record that later affects your rental? How? And how do we stop that?
So the proposal I'm putting forward to move us towards an income-based tax would actually hold renters out of the system to begin with until we navigate how to make sure they're not paying that twice.
Okay.
Yes, rent control is in the tenant protection bill. There's a bunch of moving pieces there, but it actually doesn't ask renters to pay on their income until we brought them in to reimburse them for what's being passed down by the landlord. What was your other question?
Can we have a no-cause eviction?
Yes.
If you're on your record, so any of us.
Any eviction.
Are liable to immediately have an eviction on record.
Yeah, any eviction goes on your record and you actually can't tell whether it was for cause or no cause, it's just an eviction. And it then, because of our low vacancy rate, likely means you won't be able to rent.
I'm sorry I'm doing that, but I did it, it's just so I don't have to interrupt you. So
Yeah.
Sorry, it's doing it. It's annoying, but like, at least look, we're flowing through this. Next.
Karen, my husband works for Let's Grow Kids, and I read somewhere, and I'm not gonna remember all the numbers of the laws and everything, but that the governor wants to take the money that hasn't been claimed by people who need help with their childcare and put it in the general fund. When there hasn't been enough time for all the people who are going to need it, even know they need it or to use it, and if they take that away, then what's the point? And so what's being done about that?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
That was the governor's proposal for the Budget Adjustment Act that we just passed out of the House last week. And we didn't do that. We did not take that recommendation.
Oh,
We put that in a special fund so that can be used for folks as they need it.
Childcare reserves.
Well, it's going into the case management reserve fund, so it could potentially also benefit the social services.
Okay.
If folks don't need it, then those funds can be reappropriated to help other agencies pay for case management services. Briefly.
All right. So I'm Eli Carini. I want to address how there's been a lot of talk about housing so far. I wanted to ask if there's movement about addressing the ever increasing cost of housing and addressing the speculation on housing that's driving that cost increase. Specifically, is there any movement to start taxing second homes and vacant homes at punitive rates to discourage people from having like these empty homes or these Airbnb homes and all this nonsense? Where I live, half the houses around us now are empty. And I feel like they should be paying, twice as much in taxes as we are, so that they'll sell their homes and people can buy them. And we stop seeing this prices keep going up every year.
Yeah, so look at Tanya's perspective and then I'll say the house perspective.
So under the current tax structure for property, that's not really possible because there's two categories for taxation, homestead and non-homestead. Last year, we advanced a bill telling the tax commission to return to us this year with an expanded list of categories for property taxation. That was a bill I worked really hard on. So that we can tailor that in more and do more of a tailored taxation to do exactly what you're talking about. So yes, the conversation is ongoing.
And then one of my colleagues in the House is sponsoring a bill to regulate short-term rentals statewide.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know the content of it yet. I sponsored the bill last session and I got to speak about it in committee for like 2 minutes and then they never talked about it again.
In that housing bill I mentioned, there's a study to look at tax incentives and penalties to promote affordable housing. I won't get into the details now because of the time constraint, but I'm happy to share that with people when it's ready.
My name's Katie, and I guess I wanted to ask, Congressman Byron, like the 10-year healthcare plan, universal healthcare plan, how that would look in stages. I'm really curious.
So the first year would be creating universal primary care, and then in the second or third year, I believe, I'd have to look at it. It would be looking at rolling in hospitals, but the idea is that it would be 10 years. There would be like a Green Mountain. It's complicated. So for me to explain it, it's gonna become a mess quickly. What I'd like to do is send the bill out. And then maybe if people are interested, you're welcome to attend the Universal Healthcare Caucus next Wednesday. You can jump on Zoom. It's 5 to 7. You can come for part or all of it. I think it's gonna be recorded. So that we're gonna walk through the bill at that too. So like we get to, because the idea is that the first few years would be like primary care and as a common good to everyone. And then that would reduce the cost of private insurance and Medicaid because it's being diverted into there. So that it's actually really complicated but it would be over the course of 10 years, like slowly moving towards everyone in, but starting with this universal good of primary care. I can't believe, did it not go on?
You're going on way too long, yeah.
All right, I have to be more mindful, but we're doing well. This is working because we're gonna probably get through everyone in time. So let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm not counting you. This year. 8. So if everyone goes, we're gonna be done at 12:55, which is kind of what we need to do.
And then we're gonna sprint to committees.
Yeah. Are you ready?
Yes.
Let me make sure I hit it this time. You backtrack
Don't
in
hit,
here,
don't
okay?
hit it.
Make sure I push it.
I think housing and homelessness are two very important issues that need to be dealt with and addressed, as everyone has said and everyone knows. The other issue is the governor's proposal for schools, for the funding. It's like a drastic change to go from 119 districts to 5 is like unconscionable. So I was wondering what your opinions are. Are there any parts of that you would support? Or do you really just throw the whole thing down the garbage? But before you say that, I'd like to thank you all for your work.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got 10 seconds to
There are pieces I like, but I don't know if they're,
tiny pieces.
I'll say this, I like the idea of schools being run by democratic assemblies, where as many possible decisions are made locally through participatory decision-making. And I like the idea of consolidating administration. Like regional superintendents is not the worst idea, but I don't like he went too far. And I don't like school choice vouchers being done. Does anyone else want to comment quick? Because that was a big question.
It would take me a long time.
Yeah, it's hard.
What I think about that.
And Tanya, I hope the lawsuit is successful.
I hope so as well. So I will speak briefly. There are aspects of the governor's plan that there aren't not a lot of details yet. You know, I do think the 119 school districts and 52 supervisory unions are probably too many for Vermont, and that administrative consolidation could make sense, but it has to be population based and in a way that isn't just like someone sharpieing over a map. And so I think there are aspects that could make sense, but a vast majority of the plan is not something I can support. And as the details start to unroll, I'm less and less supportive.
Exactly.
So yes.
I set the timer for you just in case. That was good, 30 seconds. So it didn't go up.
Sharon, Sutton, when all this started happening a few weeks ago, I was already depressed, but I decided everything's overwhelming. So I need to pick 1 or 2 things that are on my mind a lot. And so the environment is a big deal, and LGBTQ plus rights. So LGBTQ plus kids in school, I want to make sure that they are protected. I like the idea of keeping the soul of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and using the words rather than the initials, so that people know what you're really talking about. So that's really important. The other with the environment, I live in the Northeast Kingdom. We've had these big floods on my brook and some other brooks nearby. We are now logging our land, which hurts my heart to see the trees come down. But the forester came out and said, yeah, this is going to have to be cleared up so that the trees don't all end up in St. Johnsbury. And, can I just, well,
you can finish. You can finish. You can finish.
Housing connected to that. Trailer parks are always down in the worst part of the town. I grew up in a trailer park. I loved it. I was a kid who had a lot of freedom. I can't imagine what it'd be like to be a kid living there now with the fear of the flood coming every year or twice a year.
Thank you. Next. I didn't set it again because I don't want to interrupt you with that. Great, thank you. Ready?
Yeah. Joe, I just give my time, but I want to echo everything that Sharon just said. Those issues and the education plan sounds disastrous, and I'm so glad to know that you're all fighting for that. So I just want to thank you.
Peter, I think I'd like to use 2 words, full-time legislature. We have a full-time governor.
It is almost impossible for a part-time legislature to keep up with the governor who's here full-time, even when he's failing. And he's been failing for 8 years, and we're seeing the results of that. And then the other thing I'm curious about is in some of the housing issues that are coming up, is there a movement to re-examine current use? Because there's some abuse of current use going on in our
We'll be
town.
talking about it in my committee.
Excellent. Okay, good. I'll stop there.
Two full-time legislatures, so we failed to pass legislative modernization that would have included a study committee to look at, can we tackle 2025 problems in 5 months? The answer is no. But what I'm hoping to move forward this year is actually a legislative modernization commission that would take it out of the hands of the legislatures to come back to us with recommendations that I suspect will be, hey, you more and you need to be there full-time, because we do have a strong governor system because of the fact that we're only here for 5 months.
Yeah, and Governor Scott wants us to meet only for 90 days.
He would like us to be here less.
And speaking of just land use, I want to remind people that the state's about to embark on a historic revisiting of land use and regional planning, and there's going to be opportunities for public engagement, and it's a chance for us to organize locally and turn people out in numbers who normally wouldn't have a voice to dream of the Vermont we wish to create. So
Yeah, check out the email that got sent out to the progressive list on Monday.
next.
Yeah, question on the just cause eviction. In the absence of that, is there anything to prevent landlords from raising the rent immediately after they evict somebody? And secondly, just big insurance companies nationwide pretty much corner the market and homeowners and auto insurance. And with all the houses burning and all this being destroyed by floods, people who are not in those zones are seeing their insurance rates go up. One thing to think about is like AI is an enormous garden of energy. And given that it's going to be developed by corporations, I'll make sure that the cost for homeowners electricity doesn't go up because the AI is covering all the capacity.
Those are both my committee areas. Do you want me to respond?
Well, you have
So-
15 seconds.
All right, flood insurance, that's a tough one. The FEMA maps are getting updated. So that'll help with the national flood insurance, but we're gonna be spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year in our state to help people, buy out their homes so that they can move. And then, what was the last piece?
Cost of AI.
Oh, I mean, we actually have a reasonable plan for increasing energy production in Vermont. And we're heavily reliant upon and could always buy more power from Hydro-Quebec. But yeah, there's no plan at the state level, and we can't regulate industry across our borders. So.
Your question about AI actually is complicated, and I'm not going to try to answer it right now, but I would like to come back to that if there's time at the end, because there's benefits and risks of AI. It could also be used to save energy, but.
Eli actually took my question, thank you. So I'm going to pass my.
Oh, let me reset it so you get your full time.
Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see, S 175 was introduced by Andrew Perchlik. Also H 527 was a bill about cash, retailers having to take cash. It seems ridiculous to have to say that that's an issue, but people who don't have credit cards, people who have credit cards that are maxed out, right here in Montpelier, you go to park, you have to put an app in your phone. What if I don't want to do that? So right now, Sugar Bush Resort, Casella, and the Mad River Valley both are cashless. That bothers me.
We'll use the time to catch up here. Oh, really? Okay, well, we have 4 minutes until we have to get to committee. So sorry if that felt too structured, but it at least allowed everyone to have a chance, and that's why I did it that way. So thank you. And it was great that so many people had something to say and that we were able to actually engage. So please come back and visit again. Anything else anyone else wants to say up here?
I took notes. Excellent. Thanks for sharing. It was really good to have you here.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, guys.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I read that there was a legislative move to stockpile drugs, estrogen for trans kids and other people. Is that true?
There is a bill that we introduced that, but whether or not we can do it, that the healthcare committee is gonna have to take testimony on it. We did take testimony last year on stockpiling, I can't say the drug right, but it's abortion drug. Yes, I can't say it right. And we looked at stockpiling that, so we may be able to do it.
It would save lives.
Yeah. I mean, we don't need to be convinced of it. It's more a matter of like the logistics, and there is a bill that was introduced.
All right, we should, get
Because we're gonna
going.
be
So
late.
if you're going to go visit a committee right now, you're not late.
Although you can be late